and welcome. Let me tell you about my guest today. His life is an open book. If you want to know just how he's become who he is, besides all the records that are available, there's also a 633-page memoir. He's been feted and awarded and followed by ardent fans as well as passionate haters. His life has been threatened, he's lived in hiding, and yet he's kept saying it as he sees it. Today, he is in Mumbai or Bombay, the city where it all began 66 years ago, to release the film version of his most popular story, Midnight's Children. Please welcome one of the greatest storytellers of our times, Salman Rushdie.
Thank you.
Salman Rushdie. In Midnight's Children, pretty early on, Salim Sinai, your protagonist, says nobody from Bombay should be without a basic film vocabulary.
Yeah.
So given that you are originally a boy from Bombay, you get the movies, you use movie descriptions literally to describe,
Yes.
To tell your books. Were these 30 years a long, long wait?
Yeah, I mean, it was very strange because it used to be that almost every other writer I knew was getting their books turned into movies. It's like Kazuo Ishiguro, Ian McEwan. People only had to sneeze, and somebody would make a movie of their sneeze. And in my case, it just seemed never to happen. And actually, with Midnight Children, there were a couple of earlier attempts that sort of didn't come to fruition, and really, I had come to feel it's not going to happen. And truthfully, I didn't mind. I thought the book is still the book. There it is. But I remembered that those friends of mine, writers who had had good experiences with having their books made into movies, they all said the same thing. They all said it depends on your relationship with the director. And I met Deepa a few years before we started work on this. And I had admired her film Water very much, and we had become close, and then she suddenly proposed that maybe we should do this. And then I thought, well, maybe this is my beautiful laundrette moment, and actually it has been a very rewarding working relationship. So that's been one of the pleasures of it. So
you started your career as an ad man. You were a copywriter in advertising.
Yep.
So you're hard selling your film these days. What would be the one line thing that you'd say to sell Midnight's Children to a totally new generation?
Yeah. Well, the thing that has interested me from its first audiences, including we had a screening in Delhi last week, is that people have come out saying to me, it doesn't feel like a period piece, it feels contemporary, it feels like it's speaking to me now. And I think that, it kind of surprised me. I didn't know that people would have that reaction, because after all, in a way it is a period piece. It's from 1917 to 1977. But I suppose there are certain things that are eternal. First of all, inside the characters' lives, it's a family novel, and I think it's a lot about fathers and sons and mothers and daughters and so on, and I think these things are eternal. But also in the public side of it, the question of our relationship to history, how do our small private lives, how are they affected by the big public agenda? I think that's a question we must ask ourselves still, and all people ask themselves all the time. What is the relationship of power to the individual, and how does power operate, and so on, So I think in that sense, I was actually very encouraged that people felt that it still had that kind of contemporary relevance.
Midnight's Children, when you wrote the book, was a do or die effort for you, isn't it? It was either like we would get Salman Rushdie, the writer, or we'd get Salman Rushdie, who continued with advertising, or whatever it was.
No, it made very much so, because I had had a very bumpy start as a writer, and a lot of my early work was just not very good, and fortunately now I think, didn't see the light of day. And my first novel that came out had not done well, and I was very discouraged in some ways, and I just thought, let me just have a final sort of all or nothing shot, and that turned out to be this, and truthfully, when I finished it, I remember thinking that as far as I can tell, this is a good book, but I had no way of knowing if anybody else would agree.
The audience with all its idiosyncrasies.
Or even the publishers or anything, and I remember saying that if people don't think this is a good book, then maybe I don't know what a good book is, and I should stick to advertising copy. But fortunately, that didn't happen.
So you reclaimed India. You went on this journey around India, and you did it cheap. So you really sort of went down to the ground, if I could use that phrase. What is interesting for me is, since then, in that reclaiming of your Indian connection, your Indian identity, even as you were grappling with the fact, and you've described it very lucidly in your memoir, about being multiply rooted, about being heterogeneous. I find that very fascinating. My question to you is that since then, has your work become almost like a commentary of India, or is that limiting of you?
I don't know. I mean, the thing about writing is it doesn't go in a straight line. You know, it loops around, and I mean, India, I've gone away from the subject and come back to it and gone away again, and I mean, I don't know about it. I don't know about a commentary, but there are certainly, because I've always been interested in his history. I've always been interested in how, as in Midnight Children, how public affairs impact on private lives. I mean, I always thought, for instance, when I wrote The Moor's Last Sigh, that was almost like a sort of grown-up companion piece to Midnight Children. That Midnight Children comes out of the memory of childhood and so on. And then that later novel, in a way, talks about the transformation of that Bombay that I grew up in into the Mumbai that now exists, the change from that rather kind of more open, tolerant community which this city was in the 50s and 60s and so on, and how it changed into this sort of rather darker, more troubled sectarian city that we have now. So I felt that was like a return to the subject, but coming at it from a grown-up perspective, and so I don't know. I mean, I have no idea what I'm going to do. I mean, people ask me if there's going to be another Bombay novel or etc. And I'm truthfully, I remember once saying I don't think so, and then the next novel was The Ground Beneath Her Feet, of which there's 250 pages, of India in it. So I think it's very rash to foretell.
Do you think sometimes that because you've seen as, in quotes, a commentator about India and about the idea of India, and because of your run-ins with, your right to the freedom of expression in India, most notably being with the banning of the satanic verses, and then of course, at different points, political agendas preventing your coming here and all of that. The question is, do you feel that it somehow overshadows and distracts from the literary aspect of your work?
Yeah, to some extent, yeah. I mean, I think I'm happy that I'm a lucky writer in some ways, in that ever since Midnight Children, I've had quite a big audience, a sort of bigger audience than kind of this kind of writer usually gets, and many of them have stuck with me, and I'm happy to say that younger generation seems to come along too, But it's true that it distracts, and I think also not just that it distracts, but it gives people a false impression of what kind of writer I am, because all this stuff is so serious and dark, that people think that my writing must be serious and dark.
And it's not.
And these are funny books, I think. I think people read Midnight Children, I think one of the first things that strikes them is that it's a comic novel. And even the satanic verses.
And it's playful.
I mean, I've always, that's my nature, that's what I'm like. I don't like, even as a reader, I don't like books that don't have a sense of humor, I mean, so that, I think, has been the biggest problem, that because there's been this kind of dark cloud over sections of my life, people think that the books must also have a dark cloud over them.
And yet you have accepted this mantle of being at one level the poster boy for the freedom of speech and expression, and on the other hand the target very often for people who don't believe in it or would like to curb the freedom of expression.
Well, I mean, sometimes life gives you a job that it's not proper to refuse. I mean, I think it's such a big subject in our time, not just in India but also in India, but also in the West. You have people in America trying to ban the Harry Potter books because they promote witchcraft. I mean, it's insane stuff like that. And people in England trying to ban a play by a young Sikh playwright because she writes about a sexual assault in a gurdwara, etc. So it's not unique to one place, but this kind of assault on our ability to say what we think, is widening. It seems to me that this is a bad age for free expression, not just in India, but I've been very worried by how much it's the case in India now.
But this onus that is on you to react to it, to comment to instances of it, and to share your experiences of it, when it was happening to you, when you were in hiding in the Fatwa years, when did it stop being about you individually, the specific and when did it to you become larger, and you become to yourself the symbol of a larger cause?
Well, more or less straight away, really. And it's not exactly a symbol, but a part of a larger story. You know, you're right to say that it's a problematic role. You know, because I don't really see myself as a public spokesman. I see myself. I mean, the reason the job I gave myself was to make up stories. You know, and I mean, for instance, I sort of stopped writing political pieces in the newspapers and so on because I thought too many people were thinking of me as that and not as the author of my novels, you know. So now I think, you know, in what time remains to me, really, I mean, I'm most interested in just doing the day job, you know, writing fiction. And I think that's, especially now that I've got this story of my own life told, you know, now that the memoir is there, and also, it's not just the story of my life, because it also is an attempt to explore all these ideas that we've been talking about, you know. And so I think, okay, there it is. You want to know what I think? There it is. There's 600 pages of it. If you want to find out what I think, read that book. It's all in there. And leave me alone. I'm going to
imagine.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to, you know, dreaming.
Then at this point, if I say that you've also benefited from this, would it seem like I'm being cynical and questioning your motives?
All I'm saying is try it, you know. Try having 12 years of your life shattered like that, you know. It was very difficult to bring up my son. It was very, you know, I mean, all that happened was that it made me much better known, but it made me much better known for the wrong reason, you know. And it made people everywhere in the world able to make judgments about me without feeling the need ever to open a page of my books, you know. And
that must have bothered you.
That's very frustrating to have, you know, 90% of the people who had opinions about my work in those years had never read a paragraph of mine and didn't feel the need to read it. It was in a way not necessary to inform yourself to have a view. And that was, you know, I don't think that was a benefit. There was a real damage to me as a writer. And I think in many ways my work as a writer has had to recover from that damage, you know. And I think it's been a long road. I always thought the only way back really is to write more and more and more and more books, you know. And I mean, the Satanic Verses was the 4th novel I published. It was the 5th book I published. And now there's, you know, whatever it is, 15 or 16. So anybody who wants to read can now have a sense of me as a writer. And fortunately, as the storm dies down, you know, the attention goes back to the work, you know. And in the end, you know, people don't remember writers because of scandal. They don't remember writers because there was a tamasha about one of their books, you know. That we don't care about the literary scandal of 100 years ago. You know, so
we care about that story and how it was told.
Yeah, and if a book survives, it survives because people like it. You know, it doesn't survive because once upon a time people didn't like it.
I know you've said that Joseph Anton, the memoir, is now the big book out there for people to really know about what makes you you, and you know, how you dealt with those years of your life, and you know, how you just became who you are. And yet, I'm going to ask you.
All right.
You know, you do talk about a low in those 9 years where you actually question your beliefs, right? And you try to make this compromise. I think that's a story that you need to tell here, although I know we can read it.
It was probably about a year and a half after the Fatwa, you know, and it was a kind of just a very low moment for me physically. I mean, it was, you know, I had no idea how long this was going on. It was, the level of hostility and danger was very great. I was very worried about my family and friends and professional colleagues and, you know, publishers, translators, you know, all of this, so much danger for so many people. And there was a general attitude in England, certainly at the time, that this was somehow my fault. So, you know, it's like, you broke it, you fix it, you know. And under the pressure of all that, I was lured into, I mean, against my better judgment really, into a dialogue with a group of British-based Muslim leaders. Many of them were actually Egyptian, I think, but British-based, and who sort of promised me the world, who said, you know, come and talk to us and we can fix all this, you know. And I mean, it's clear to me now that it was kind of a trap, because they really had no intention of doing that. You know, what they wanted me to do was to compromise myself and thus, you know, discredit myself in a way.
Did you do it out of fear?
And I did it partly out of fear for me, but mostly out of despair, really. I mean, it was, and I immediately knew, like the moment I left that meeting, that I'd made a very bad mistake, you know, and then it's taken me, you know, a lot of my life to try and undo that mistake. But what I felt in retrospect, and I tried to say in this book, is that although it was a stupid moment, it was a moment of moral compromise, and I regret it, that in many ways it was a beneficial thing for me, because it was like a turning point moment, and moment where I learned, if you like, the hard way, that you don't make those compromises, that you know, you don't do deals with people who don't really want to do a deal with you. You know, you don't compromise on issues that should not be compromised on.
And you respected yourself less when you did that?
Yes, I did. I did, and took me a long time to fight my way back from that. And you know, there's one of these terrible things about life is that you want people to like you. You know,
yeah.
You know, and you think, if I could just explain it to you properly, you know, then you'll stop being angry, and we can all get on. You know, and I think mistakes like that come out of that error that you want everybody to like you. Once you realize that, you know, actually what's more important than being liked is to be saying what you truly believe.
To thine own self be true.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And you know, and I thought, then okay, you're not going to like me because you don't like what I have to say, because that's not how you think. And you know what? Maybe I don't like you. You know, and it's all right. It's all right. That's just how it is.
You know, I've heard your views on absolute freedom of expression versus restraints to freedom of expression, and then there's the other argument about self-regulation and, you know, what you need to be, your responsibilities are, so that you don't offend anybody else. I know what your view is, and that is, I think today you believe that it's absolute freedom of expression that you believe should exist. I think you need to say that again and explain why that is so critical, that it has to be, the freedom of expression has to be absolute, no matter what trouble it may cause to somebody.
Well, because you can't only be free on Tuesdays.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the thing, you know, you're either free or you're not. You can't be free only from 9:30 in the morning to 10:30 every day. You know, it's not divisible, freedom. You know, it's a thing you either have or you don't have. And to be free, you must be able to make the assumption that you are free. You know, if when you start to write or make a film or whatever, you are worried that tomorrow somebody may be offended by it, then you're not free. You know, you're not free. So that's an unacceptable limitation. I mean, there has never been a right not to be offended. You know, the world is full of things that annoy all of us.
Yeah.
You know, and we just have to deal with it. You know, I mean, that's I think, it's not a very complicated argument. You know, it really is. The argument is that there is a great diversity of expression, and a free society benefits from that diversity. And within that diversity, you can choose what satisfies you. And if something offends you, you know, it's very easy to be not offended by a book. You just have to shut it. At that point, it loses its ability to offend you. Go and find a book you like.
You're quite unequivocal that artists should not practice self-regulation or restraint on the basis of the fact that it might hurt other people's sentiments and might create trouble.
Look, art has always been troublesome. You know, I mean, art is often, let's say, ahead of the society. You know, and I mean, artists have often espoused not just ideas but personal lifestyles and so on, which are not to the taste of the masses. Let's say, you know, that's true of every country in every age. You know, and it's one of the things that art is for, is to ask new questions, and to re-examine old ideas. You know, to say, let's not take that for granted. Let's look at it again. You know, or to make fun of stuff, or to satirize stuff, or indeed to be destructive sometimes. You know, just the act of imagination is constantly an act of remaking. You know, and that's true of every art form. This is not literature only. It's true of painting. It's true of movies. It's true, you know, it's true of scholarship as well. You know, and one of the things that worries me here now is how there are attempts to prevent that necessary act of rethinking. You know, so whether it's Ramanujan's essay on the Ramayana, whether it's Rohinton Mistri's novel, whether it's Hussein's paintings or, you know, this week Kamal Hassan's movie, you know, it seems so easy for, as you said, small groups to impose their will on a larger community. That's not freedom, that's being bullied.
So given that the state is not doing anything to stop the majority of people from being bullied, what should the majority do?
Well, it should wake up. It should understand that its liberties are the ones that it is losing, you know, because the censorship of a writer is also the censorship of the reader. You know, it means that if somebody can decide for you what books you're allowed to read, that is your loss as a reader. If somebody can decide for you what movies you're allowed to see, that's your loss as a moviegoer. You know, we should be able to decide these things. And the cinema audience is perfectly capable of deciding, I want to see this film, I don't want to see that film. You know, a book reader is perfectly capable of going to a bookshop and saying, I don't want to read this book, I prefer that book. You know, these are the choices that we as the consumers, never mind the makers of the work, those of us who read books, who see films, who like to look at paintings, you know, let us make the choices.
Let's shift a little bit. I mean, this is as personal as it can get, but now let's talk about the fact that your children are your biggest joy, and the fact that you've been married many times, you've had your heart broken, you've broken people's heart. At 66, do you still...
65.
Okay, not yet. I can see how you're clinging on to the few more months of 2013, isn't it? June. Okay, so 65, do you feel the need to be loved?
No, I mean, I think all of us do, you know, and I think I'm actually quite fortunate in that regard, you know, that I have my children, but I also have very close, loving family and friends, you know, so I think that's plenty. As far as marriage is concerned, I'm not allowed.
How many times bitten? 4 times bitten?
4, yeah. I mean, one of them was very brief, but I mean, look, I'll put it like this: supposing it wasn't marriages, you know, I mean, if in the course of 65 years you've had like 3.5 important relationships, it's not so bad, you know, it's not so bad. I mean, one of them was 14 years long, one of them was 10 years long, one of them was 8 years long. That's not like, it's not like a moment, you know. These are long relationships, and yeah, I mean, I just unfortunately got married to them all.
Is there any introspection about what you could be doing wrong?
No, of course there is. There's, I think, plenty of stuff in the book about what I think. Of course, I mean, it always takes 2 people to wreck something. You know, it takes 2 people to make it and two people to break it. But you know, human relationships are a mess. It's not. I'm not unique in this matter. You know,
just braver.
Yeah, I think, you know, it would be nice for some of the people who are critical of this to just have a look at their own lives.
No, did you hear any criticism?
No, not saying you. But it has
there have been people who have been critical.
Heard. Yeah.
Okay, so you're open to the idea of falling in love again?
No, of course, yes. I mean, one of the things that being married 4 times, I think, proves is that I'm sort of ridiculous.
The eternal optimist.
Ridiculous, optimistic, romantic. You know, but I don't know about marriage. Marriage, I don't know.
You want to go back to being the storyteller and cease to be the story. Yet I know it's difficult because we're meeting you today and we know that you've got police protection. So it's not that easy, is it, to go back to being the storyteller? Is it easy?
Well, I mean, the police protection is a joke. You know, it was not at my request. I actually don't want it. They imposed it upon me, and I think it's silly. They're protecting me against nothing. You know, there's dozens and dozens of people in khaki outside protecting me against nothing.
You have no fear in your mind anymore?
No, I mean, it's been 13 years since there was any problem. You know, and it's been over for longer than it went on for. And I've led a perfectly normal life all over the world for all that time. And so for these people to be out there, it's kind of a waste of public money.
Well, we hope you can get back to being the storyteller and not the story. And I want you to read from your book to leave us with what I think is great food for thought for anybody who wants to be an artist and be creative.
Man was the storytelling animal, the only creature on earth that told itself stories to understand what kind of creature it was. The story was his birthright, and nobody could take it away.
Salman Rushdie, that's the one thing you've taught us. Pleasure talking to you. Thank you.